Hi everyone, my name is Abdulaziz. I'm one of the political science students at the University of Simon Fraser. In this short video, I'd like to spend some time talking briefly about some of the current mechanisms used to ensure accountability in the Canadian political system. As we all know, that Canada is a democratic country, which means that there needs to be mechanisms in place independent of the government to make sure that accountability is taking place. These mechanisms will assess the work of government that has been done. They might include acts, rules, and offices which try to make sure that the government is doing its job properly. However, there are many arguments about the effectiveness of these mechanisms. Some argue, for example, that they work while others don't work properly. So let's just examine how the current mechanisms for holding the government accountable are open to criticism. Before we do that, I'd like to remind you about the word accountability. What does it mean to be accountable? Basically, accountability is considered to be a fundamental principle of the democratic government. It's really the notion that those who are in power should be held responsible for their actions. So if they've done something wrong, they will be questioned by either the government or the people. So it's important to keep in mind the meaning of accountability in order to understand these mechanisms. The first mechanism that we are going to look at is the Office of the Auditor General. The Office of the Auditor General in Canada is one of the arm's-length agencies which is responsible for watching over the financial dealings for the government. The Auditor General usually is responsible for making sure that the activities of the government are cost-effective. However, the question of who the Auditor General is accountable for making sure that their work is independent and objective is a big one. Since it takes such a long process to independently assess the work of the Auditor General, it could be argued that that mechanism in place has some problems. If the Auditor General's office is not accountable to anybody, then how can we be sure that they are doing their job properly? Moreover, the reports that the Auditor General makes are sometimes subject to certain recommendations by members in the government. Those members sometimes intervene. As a result, the independence of the Auditor General would not be fully implemented. The second mechanism that I'd like to spend some time talking about is the ministerial responsibility. Ministerial responsibility is one of the mechanisms that are considered to be useful in ensuring accountability in the public service. It is true that ministers have the authority to make decisions within their spheres, but also it's true that they will be questioned in the Parliament in terms of their activities. However, there has been a controversy over the confusion of this policy. Those who argue that this doctrine is confusing, they say that it's true in theory, but it's not real in practice. For instance, in the Constitution, it's declared that when ministers do something wrong in their departments, they are required to justify their position. Otherwise, they will be required to resign. In reality, that theory doesn't come into play. Therefore, the mechanism of ministerial responsibility will not be fully implemented. The last mechanism that we should know a little bit about it is the access to information. Access to information is also another mechanism used in a democratic government to ensure accountability. The goal behind that, the purpose behind that is to provide people with required information regarding the political activities within the system so that they can participate in the decision-making process. It has been suggested that if people had such knowledge, they would be able to criticize and hold politicians and bureaucrats responsible. However, there was a big debate in the House of Commons regarding the Access to Information Act in 1970. For those who were not in favor of the act, their arguments revolved around sensitive themes such as national security, defense, and cabinet confidences. They were worried about the privacy of information. Some argue that this mechanism is just used for personal and political purposes as well. Politicians who would support the act may easily be against it after they hold power. In other words, they might be with it today, but against it tomorrow. So, we can see that this mechanism might not be fully implemented. This is a brief discussion about some of the current mechanisms to ensure accountability in the Canadian Federal Public Service. There are many other mechanisms, but I hope you found those three useful. Thank you very much for watching.